This video is sponsored by LG Gallery Plus. At the end of the video, there's a chance to win an LG TV and complimentary Gallery Plus subscription. When we think of Vincent van Gogh, we tend to picture blazing yellows, swirling skies, and a tortured genius painting at an impossible speed. We think of the bandaged ear, the fields of Arles, and those final, frantic months in the asylum when some of his most famous works were made. That's the Vincent we've inherited, the legend, the myth, and the man defined by his final years. But it wasn't always like that. Before he picked up a paintbrush at the age of 27, before the sunflowers, before the Starry Night, and long before anyone paid attention to his work, there was another Vincent entirely, a man who struggled to find his place in the world. He failed repeatedly at teaching, at preaching, at paid work of almost any kind, and spent years drifting from one attempt to the next, never quite belonging anywhere. During all that wandering, something else was developing, a real empathy for ordinary people, for those who lived hard lives with very little recognition. People on the fringes of society. This would eventually lead him to create what he believed was his first great painting, The Potato Eaters. Most people around him disagreed. They criticized its awkward technique and its dark, muddy colors. Vincent, however, defended it fiercely, even years later. By contrast, The Starry Night, now seen as one of his greatest achievements, was a painting he himself dismissed as unsuccessful. The Potato Eaters marked a turning point. It is where everything Vincent had struggled with, his failures, rejections, and sense of being an outsider, finally came together. It shows us who he was before the legend took hold, and before he became the Van Gogh we think we know. Vincent van Gogh's childhood is often overlooked. We tend to jump straight to the asylum years or the final frantic burst of creativity, a period that was actually quite short. But his childhood is essential to understanding him. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born in 1853 in the small village of Zundert in the southern Netherlands, the son of a Protestant minister. He was born exactly a year to the day after his parents' first child, also called Vincent, was still born. Every Sunday on the way to church, he passed the grave that had his own name on it. This isn't just a curious detail, it was really the first portrait of himself he ever came across, his name carved in stone. Growing up in the shadow of a dead brother shaped him deeply. It gave him a sense of displacement that never really left. He was withdrawn, intense, and painfully sensitive, a child who felt things deeply in a family that valued calm and control. But he loved being surrounded by nature, and later wrote about long walks, birds' nests, twisted trees, and the slow rhythm of rural labour. Through his Protestant father, he inherited a belief that dignity came not from wealth or social rank, but from honest work and simple virtues. Long before he ever learned to draw, this became the way he saw the world. When he later painted weavers, potato diggers, and quiet cottages, he was returning to the visual language of his childhood. Zundert's atmosphere can be felt in the tone of the Potato Eaters. As a child, he formed deep attachments to teachers, to relatives, even to books, and suffered when those bonds were broken. And this pattern would follow him into adulthood with friends, lovers, and fellow artists. Out of his 5 siblings, he was closest to his younger brother Theo. As children, they were fond of each other, but nothing yet suggested the extraordinary partnership their lives would later become. Life in a minister's household meant religion wasn't simply discussed, it was woven into the fabric of daily life. Prayers opened the mornings, Sunday was observed without fail, and moral seriousness permeated everything. Vincent absorbed all of it, and in his 20s he even tried to become a preacher himself, living in deliberate poverty as a kind of spiritual calling. Looking back on his childhood, he once wrote, "My youth has been austere and cold and sterile." At 15, for reasons that remain unclear, he left school halfway through the year. It marked the end of his formal education and the beginning of a long, uncertain search for meaning. A search that would eventually lead him to art. But not before he took many detours and faced disappointment after disappointment. Before he even picked up a paintbrush seriously, Vincent tried out several careers and failed at all of them. His grandfather, also called Vincent, was an art dealer, and two of his sons became art dealers. One of those uncles gave Vincent his first job at the age of 16 as an apprentice art dealer, working first in The Hague, then London, and then Paris. During his time in London, he visited famous institutions like the British Museum and the National Gallery, where the works he admired included those by peasant painters such as Jean-François Millet and Jules Breton. He was by all accounts diligent and serious, and hopeless at sales. He lectured customers on morality, argued about art, and then fell hopelessly in love with a woman who didn't return his feelings. When he was dismissed from the firm, he decided to become a preacher like his father. He was not disciplined enough to study theology, so he worked as a missionary in the Borinage region, one of the poorest mining districts in Belgium. There, he gave away everything: his clothes, his furniture, even his bed, sleeping on the floor in solidarity with the miners, who called him Christ of the coal mine. Eventually, the church authorities also dismissed him for being too extreme. But it was in the darkness of the mining region, really embracing the people on the edges of society, that he decided that the lives of working people had dignity, gravity, and a beauty that deserved to be shown. And this became the foundation of the Potato Eaters. Van Gogh spent most of his early life searching for a sense of purpose. He tried religion, he tried teaching, he tried missionary work and a series of jobs, each one approached with his usual intensity, and each one ending in frustration. By the time he turned to art, it was almost out of sheer exhaustion. He had run out of alternatives. But once he began to draw, something shifted. Something opened up. Art gave his intensity somewhere to go. He worked obsessively and passionately, as he would for the rest of his life, filling pages with studies of heads, hands, boots, baskets, farm tools, or whatever he had to hand. The results were often clumsy and unrefined. Proportions were off, anatomy incorrect. None of that bothered him, though, because he wasn't interested in elegance or surface beauty. What he wanted was truth. From the start, he was drawn to working people. He admired artists who treated labourers not as charming scenery, but as serious subjects, worthy of attention and respect. Gustave Courbet's The Stonebreakers affected him deeply, as did the peasant paintings of Millet, which show working people as serious, dignified figures shaped by hard labour. Van Gogh believed that the lives of ordinary people, their struggles, routines, and quiet endurance were worthy of great art. This outlook was strengthened by his engagement with the Barbizon painters, the mid-19th century artists who turned away from idealization and towards rural life as it was actually lived. Millet in particular showed him that art could be emotionally charged and ethically serious, without being conventionally beautiful. Vincent studied his work obsessively and copied him more than any other artist, over 20 times throughout his career, using repetition as a way to think, to learn, and to absorb a new way of seeing. From the Barbizon painters, he learned that emotional intensity was more important than perfectly refined technique. In 1883, Van Gogh moved to Nuenen, a small village in Brabant where his parents were now living. It was here that his ideas about art, labour and dignity began to take clearer shape. He walked the fields daily, sketching weavers, farm workers and peasants, not as distant subjects, but as people whose lives he wanted to understand. He didn't want to observe from the outside, he wanted to live among them, sharing their routines and hardships. There was nothing sentimental about this. Vincent felt a genuine kinship with poor people, whose lives of exhaustion and uncertainty echoed his own inner life. After being dismissed as a preacher, he may have been searching for new rituals, and in the simple act of eating together, he saw something profoundly human, community formed through labour and shared sustenance. For Vincent, the peasant table became almost sacred. By the spring of 1885, he felt ready to attempt something larger, a painting that would bring these beliefs together in a single, serious statement. He wanted to make a work that stood for something. Vincent painted the Potato Eaters in 1885, more than a decade after the first Impressionist exhibition, but before he had encountered that group of artists or the colour we now associate so strongly with his work. This painting belongs to an earlier phase when he was still teaching himself how to paint. That is what makes it so important in understanding him. The figures are members of the de Groot family, local farm workers Vincent knew well. He visited their cottage often, sometimes daily, sketching them as they ate their evening meal, studying their faces, hands, and movements over time. His preparation was unusually thorough. Before painting the final canvas, Vincent made 2 painted studies and dozens of drawings. Over a single winter, he produced more than 40 studies of peasant heads, including at least 20 of Gordina de Groot, the young woman who appears in the finished painting. 3 months earlier, he had already painted the elderly man who later sits at the table holding a cup. These were people Vincent had spent hours with. The scene is simple. 5 figures sit around a small table in a dark interior, sharing a meal of potatoes. A clock on the wall tells us it is 7 in the evening. The room contains quiet details, a religious print beside the clock, a wooden clog fixed to the fireplace holding cutlery, sausages smoking faintly above the hearth. On the back of one chair, now almost lost in the darkened paint, Vincent wrote his own name. Steam rises from the freshly boiled potatoes. This was not a special meal. This is basic sustenance. Potatoes were eaten constantly, prepared in different ways throughout the day. Compositionally, the painting draws on older Dutch models. Vincent was familiar with this work, which uses a similar arrangement, including a figure placed with their back to the viewer. Vincent adopted this device deliberately. It creates a sense of intimacy, pulling us into the room rather than leaving us outside it. This choice stands in contrast to many group scenes set around a table, which for the sake of composition often leave one side empty, to avoid showing a figure from behind, and to keep us at a distance as a viewer. Technically, the painting pushed Vincent hard. Portraying 5 figures convincingly was difficult for an artist still learning anatomy and proportion. Doing so under the distorted light of an oil lamp made it even harder. Critics have often pointed to the awkward bodies and exaggerated faces. Vincent was well aware of this. Accuracy was not his priority. He insisted he was not trying to paint mathematically correct heads or hands, which, as we can see here, he was capable of, but rather to capture the essence of what he saw. His brother Theo, now an art dealer and his main means of support, was not impressed by the painting either. But even years later, Vincent defended it as one of his best works. Starry Night, by contrast, painted just 4 years later, was, he once wrote, a failure of a painting. At first glance, these paintings seem to belong to completely different worlds, but beneath the surface they are driven by remarkably similar ideas. Although their palettes differ, both paintings use colour symbolically rather than descriptively. The murky greens and browns of the Potato Eaters are deliberately earthy, binding the figures to the soil they work. The colours feel heavy, worn and tired. Whereas in the Starry Night, blues and yellows are set against each other to create movement and contrast. Yellow suggests light and energy, while blue creates a sense of depth and night. and again, colour is used less to describe the scene than to shape its mood. Seen this way, the Potato Eaters and the Starry Night are not opposites, but bookends. With the Potato Eaters, he applied the paint thickly and crudely, emphasising their rough and gnarled hands. He was, as he later said, ploughing his canvas in the same way they ploughed their fields. The central female figure stands out. She has no chair and is standing. Steam from the potatoes forms a faint halo around her head, and her gaze seems lifted towards the religious image on the wall. Is she praying or serving? The ambiguity gives the scene a quiet, restrained spirituality. And that sense of spirituality runs through the painting. Vincent's religious beliefs had not disappeared, they had changed direction. Here, meaning is found in labour, community, and shared hardship, rather than a church. The table becomes an altar, the meal something close to holy rites. At the same time, we can look at the painting as a reflection of Vincent's own isolation. He and his parents had always had a difficult relationship, and his new career as a painter was driving a wedge between them. Then a scandal broke out when Gordina became pregnant out of wedlock, and local gossips said the father was Vincent, which they both denied. His father was furious that the family name was involved. Perhaps by painting this close family sharing a meal, Vincent may have been imagining the domestic warmth he lacked from his own family. In a letter to his brother Theo, Vincent explained the purpose of the work clearly. I really have wanted to make it so that people get the idea that these folk who are eating their potatoes by the light of their little lamp have tilled the earth themselves with these hands they are putting in the dish. That sentence, for me, sums up the Potato Eaters. It is not sentimental. It is not polished. It is Vincent letting us know that these lives matter. Vincent van Gogh truly believed the Potato Eaters would be his breakthrough, and he felt he had painted peasant life as it truly was. He was so convinced of its success that before the canvas was even finished, he had a lithograph made so his brother Theo could promote it in Paris. His brother, however, saw the painting very differently. To him, it was too dark for Paris, a city captivated by Impressionist colour, and too firmly rooted in Dutch realism to feel modern. What Vincent regarded as expressive truth was received instead as a technical failure. The Potato Eaters might not have brought Vincent the recognition he hoped for, but it feels like it set something essential in place. It marked the point from which his art would move forward, defining both what he would leave behind and what would continue to shape him. Everything that followed would be brighter, more colourful, and more radical. Yet it would still carry the same conviction his first great work did, that art should be rooted in real lives, and it should be honest.
Hello, my name is James Payne and I'm the creator of Great Art Explained. LG Gallery Plus is a new way to experience high-quality classic art curated by you on your wall, rather than in a crowded gallery. It's a brilliant way to make your living space unique and to spend time with art. LG are partnered with some of the world's major museums to show extraordinary works of art. If you own an LG TV, you just go to WebOS, then Gallery Plus, and browse for your favorites. Naturally, after making this video, I'm drawn to Van Gogh. The shelf is a dedicated curated space in LG Gallery Plus and features exclusive collections from the National Gallery in London. Some of the paintings really zoom in on details, and you can see the artist at work. Look at this, it's spectacular. Vincent painted at least 7 sunflowers in Arles during a brief, intense period. He once wrote that the sunflower was mine, sort of like a personal motif, like Monet's water lilies or Cézanne's apples. He isn't painting ideal beauty here, but time itself. 15 sunflowers at different stages, from bud to bloom to decay. Even at their most dazzling yellow, there is a quiet sense of fragility. A wheat field with cypresses is another work in the LG Gallery Plus from the National Gallery, and one of my favourites. Painted at the asylum in Saint Remy during a period of intense productivity, it shows that this was not a time of artistic collapse, but one of clarity and ambition. Van Gogh said that works like this were attempts to express emotion by means of a landscape, and with these close-ups on the National Gallery shelf, you can really see how Vincent applied the paint direct to the canvas, adding texture, dimension, and expressive energy. This is a wonderful way to experience art and turn your living space into a personalized gallery. And you can win your own LG TV and Gallery Plus subscription by entering free at the link below. Thank you.